I'm thankful we had a literature teacher reading that today, because if I would have read it, you'd have been really thoroughly confused. Paul gets a little wordy there, writes in a classical style that we're not used to. But it's a beautiful writing. Before we go any further, I do want to say, we didn't have any announcements, but one announcement, especially we have some folks in here that this applies to. A week from today, we start the 2016 class of confirmation. And it's not too late to get registered for that. If you go to the website, there's plenty of information. And in relating to our series, The Simple Life, life for most of our young people that are in that middle school age range, it's complicated. So with that, this year the schedule varies. So you have to, for example, we're not just doing it every Saturday evening or every Sunday evening. The dates and times and locations vary. But all you need to know for now is go to the website, look at the information that's there, and the next Sunday it begins here at 12 o'clock. Your parents or grandparents do not have to be members here. Confirmation is a wonderful opportunity for a young person to explore their faith. And at the end, they make their own decision whether they're going to confirm their own faith in Jesus the Christ. That's part of the process. But if nothing else, they get exposed to Methodist history and beliefs, and also get encouraged to study some of the Bible, some of the classic stories and characters and theological pieces in the Bible. And so, in other words, it's open to everybody. And even if you just want to come to the first class next Sunday at 12, it would be worth their while to do that. So last week when we gathered, we began this simple life. We began this series. And we looked at a story from the Gospels where Jesus had paid a visit to Mary and Martha's house, and Martha was distracted. Remember, we get that famous line from Jesus, Martha, Martha. And we had some fun with that. But she was distracted, and it helped us to get off on the right track, thinking about one of the barriers to or one of the causes of a complicated life is having priorities that are out of whack. And so that story, first of all, gives us a foundation that our number one priority should be listening to Jesus. And Mary was doing that. Martha was distracted in the kitchen, not doing a bad thing. She was working through the lens of hospitality, which is good. But she wasn't listening at the feet of Jesus. And so through that, we also were reminding and encouraging folks to spend some time with Jesus through reading the Bible, but also just laying a foundation as we begin this year of looking at our priorities. And for many of us, if not most of us, if we really looked at our priorities, in many cases, me included, Pastor Wilson included, if we're not careful, our priorities get out of whack quickly. And that leads to a complicated life. So this week, we moved to another piece of this. And so last week we wanted to spend some time on things that matter, spend more time on things that matter. This week, if you think our schedules are complicated, if you think your schedules are complicated, it has nothing on relationships. Raise your hand in here if you have ever had a complicated relationship. Everybody, right? All right, we've all had complicated relationships. Don't raise your hand now, but how many of you, just silently, how many of you are in a complicated relationship now? How many of you are in a complicated relationship with the person sitting beside you? Don't raise your hand. Don't you dare raise your hand. It's just a fact of life. It's a fact of life that we find ourselves. And if we would take a poll, that would be our number one thing, is that it is important. that we clean up some of those relationships. We want to have healthier relationships with family and friends, and that's an important piece of this series that we're working on today. The issue here is we all agree on that our life is complicated due to relationships that are complicated. So we all agree there. Also, if we would have a discussion, if we sat across the table or in a circle with one another and had a discussion, we pretty much know what the problems are. Like we could say, here's why this relationship with my spouse is complicated. Here's why my relationship with my coworker is complicated. Here's why, fill in the blank. And here are some simple steps to take that could move us towards a healthier relationship with them. So we all agree there. So what happens? How we know the problem and we pretty much know the solutions. What happens? What is it? And that's why we chose the reading from the Apostle Paul here, is because the fundamental problem here with relationships is on us. It's us. Paul says it beautifully. We know what to do with one another, but we don't do it. I know exactly what not to say to Pastor Melissa. I can feel it welling up inside of me. And coming, and I'm talking to myself. And I have ADHD, and so I'm talking to myself often. But I know what I'm about to say. I know, and I'll talk to myself all day. Don't say it. When she gets home, don't you dare bring it up. So I know, 1,000 times I know not to say it. And when she comes in the door and she looks so beautiful and wonderful, and I can't wait to reconnect her, and I can't help myself it comes out. It comes out. Why, Melissa, did you do this? Or why did you do that? Or here's what you should say. And I know as I'm saying it, what an idiot. And Paul is attesting to that here. He's saying it's just in us to want to do the right thing and can't do it. It's just in us not to want to do bad things, but we just do it. It's human nature. And for whatever reason, some of us are better at it than others in the negative. And so we can relate to that. Now, Paul is talking about this inner conflict, and he's really concentrating on sin in terms of his relationship with God. And so, so just to pause for a moment, Jesus tells us, and he's relating it to the law versus grace. And so that reminds us of Jesus saying, the two most important laws or there's one really thought of in two ways. Love God, so your relationship with God, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So we think about that in the back of our mind as we read this. I say that because Paul's really talking about his relationship with God here, but it's the same principles. And so in other words, he's saying, I know what God expects of me. I still can't do it. I know what I'm supposed to do in terms of my relationship with God. I don't do it, and vice versa. There's just something wrong. And what's wrong is sin is in him, and the grips and the stripes and power of sin. But it's the same, he might as well be talking about his neighbor as well. And so love of God, love of neighbor, it's the same principles. And so we're using in our case for today, we're using what he's saying about his relationship with God, and we are applying that to our spouse, to our kids, to our parents, to our neighbor, to our co-workers, and so on and so forth. And so he's saying, I just can't do it. I just can't do it on my own. And it's this inner conflict. It's all this junk. It's all this stuff that is in him, this stuff we call sin. And so I want to give you a key word. If last week Martha was distracted And so distraction was a barrier to the simple life. This week's word corresponding to distraction is congestion. Congestion. And so the barrier to healthy relationships with family and friends is congestion. And we can relate to that this time of year. If you've been congested yet, nasally, is that a word? If you had nasal congestion, you know all that gunk that interferes with breathing and sleeping and eating and working and playing and all the things that you need to do. It's junk that's a barrier to things moving properly in your body. Or if you are on the Baltimore Beltway at the right time of day or the wrong time of day, you can relate to the word congestion. Anything that keeps you from making a movement. A movement. And so if we want to move towards healthier relationships, let's think in terms of congestion. Congestion. And so Paul is writing this beautiful passage on all this junk that's in, all this congestion that's just in him that he has to get out. And so, as any good Bible teacher does, I want you to think about 7 different ways. 7 is about like to be on TV, right? We'll tell you about 7 different ways we get congested. And then I want you to send me 1995, and all your congestion will go away. Okay? All right. But the first one is we're not going to spend a lot of time on. We're not going to spend a lot of time on any of these. But the first one, just real quickly, because we talked a lot about this last week, it goes back to Martha's problem. The first one is time. So the first congestion, the first thing that blocks movement towards healthier relationship is we're too busy. All right. I don't want to belabor that part. And if you missed last Sunday, remember you can go online and watch the sermon again, or watch it for the first time. We talked a lot about that. We're too busy, and we're preaching to the choir. I mean, raise your hand if you're not busy. All right, so we know that. But again, knowing it is only half the battle. We got to do something about it. But when we're busy, it harms our relationship. Lydia, our 5-year-old, we have discovered more often than not, in the last month or two, we'll come into the room, or I'll come home, or whatever. She is watching my sermons on YouTube. And we were like, wow, she's very theologically astute. Maybe she's going to be a preacher. Or maybe my sermons are just that good. She keeps going. And Melissa says, no, she misses you. She's not spending time with you enough. And talk about cutting to the heart. And it makes complete sense. Because not only am I busy like all of you, but having we don't have a large family. I learned this week we have a wide family. Wide. So I joke that we're wide. So in a wide family, so I drive and spend time with Marley, driving her to gymnastics. I drive Asher to his things. Annika has dance. So I'm spending, and Lydia, that's not quality time, by the way. Driving and dropping your kids off somewhere, it sounds good, sounds cool. That's not, you get a little bit of time in the car. But the kids want to spend time, dropping your kid off at baseball practice. The kid would much rather be doing baseball with me in the backyard. That's quality time. All right, but we've messed, and I don't want to preach about that because we all know the problem. But anyway, but I don't even do that. Lydia doesn't have anywhere to go. She's only 5. And she does dance class once a week, and I don't get to take her because I'm taking Marla. So in other words, she's craving that time. She's missing me. And so I've got to clear up some of that congestion and spend some more time with Lydia. And so I took her yesterday to my basketball game, and she sat on the bench with me. And so she thought that was cool to help coach. So trying. All right? So that's time. So time is a congestion. Now we're going to move to, just briefly, 1 Corinthians 13. So another Paul letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that's the love chapter. If any of you are in love, Richard, are you in love? All right, so he knows the love chapter. All right. Jimmy, I know, is in love. He knows the love chapter. All right. But anyway, it's the one that says love is this, love is that, love is not this. But we can pick up in verse 4, you can read it for homework, but we can pick up the other 6 congestion areas, and so we'll just do them quickly. But it says love is patient. So in being impatient, you want to harm a relationship, especially with your kids or with your spouse or whoever, or a parent, vice versa, be impatient. Impatience is junk that clogs up your relationship. It's congestion, impatience. We know how, and it's related to C number 1. There's a little side note, C number 1, the time. Because a lot of times we're impatient when we're tired. And we're tired because we're busy, over busy. All right, so it all works together. Paul says love is patient. So if you're impatient with anybody in your life, it's no wonder that relationship's complicated. And so we got to admit that. It says love is kind. And we beat this dead horse about being mean. If you're mean to others, your relationship's going to be harmed. It's not rocket science. And it happens to all of us. See number 1. When we're overbooked, when we're busy, when we're tired, sometimes we get a little mean with each other and one another. But it blocks movement. It's congestion. It needs to be cleared up. Stop being mean to one another. I could give another home example of that, but I won't because that's mean. Number 4. Paul says love isn't jealous. Man, jealousy. If we can all think back, for our adults in the room, if you can think back to your early days of love with your spouse or boyfriends and girlfriends growing up, you've probably had many occasions where jealousy reared its ugly head, right? Now I know as mature adults, we never get jealous in terms of romantic love, right? But we still get jealous. We get jealous in platonic love. You know, human beings are a jealous group of people. We are jealous of other people getting attention, whether it's a co-worker or a brother or sister, a literal brother and sister. It doesn't have to be talking about romance. Now, our middle schoolers and high schoolers in the room, you deal with jealousy on a daily basis, right? Can I get an amen from our youth? All right, Luke. All right, good. All right, so jealousy is not love. So if you're navigating, the Valentine's dance that's coming up, and you're trying to figure out who's going with who and whom and where and how, be wary of jealousy. It is a part of life, but you don't have to play that game or participate. You can be prepared for it to be able to handle it a little bit better. It's still not fun. But jealousy is not love. And it's definitely a congestion point. Paul goes on to say, it doesn't brag. So love doesn't brag. So arrogance is a congestion point. Again, you want to harm a relationship, you want an unhealthy relationship, walk around being arrogant all the time. I like walking around being arrogant some of the time. That's fun. Just kidding. But if you're living there, being arrogant, we should be, have high self-esteem. We gain our identity through Jesus the Christ. That should give you a level of self-esteem. You've been nurtured and raised, hopefully, in a home where people have told you they're proud of you. That's not always the case. But you have reason to feel good about yourself. But there's a balance. And living on the arrogant side of that line, your whole life, every day, it's going to make your life complicated in terms of your relationships. He also says love isn't rude. And this is not to be confused with being mean. But love is not rude. If you're rude, it's going to be an unhealthy situation. You can all think of examples of when we are rude to others, even those that we love. And when they're rude to us, we've got to cut it out. We've got to minimize that. We've got to limit it. We've got to clear that up if we want healthy relationships. And finally, number 7. Love, in this translation, says it doesn't seek its own advantage. We're selfish. Selfish. We look after numero uno. Again, very human place to live. Looking after yourself. Again, and the problem is, for all these, there's fine lines. You do have to be willing and ready and able to take care of yourself and to look after your interests, but it can't cross over to the place where you're being selfish. If you're selfish and you're constantly putting yourself first, then your relationships are going to be sick. They're going to be congested. They're going to be complicated, more complicated than they have to be. I put those in a list, 1 through 7, like they did in antiquity, in history. If you see a list in the Bible or any other ancient writing, a lot of times the first and the last are the most important. Does anybody remember why that was the case? Why they do that back in the old days?
Because nothing was written down.
Yeah, because you weren't writing things down. And so the thing that you would be more likely to remember is the first thing and the last. So time is the biggest problem in our congested list, and selfishness is number 7, our last. But everything in between can cause our relationships to be congested, can cause us problems, can cause us to be unhealthy. And in all these lists, nothing on this list was a new revelation for any of us here. Any of us. We know this already. This wasn't something like, oh, wow, never thought about that. Pastor John's a genius. My relationships are going to be solved. That's right. Send that 1999. No, we know this. We know this. But just like Paul, it's so hard. It's still hard. And so hard to do the right thing. And then Paul's answer to this then is, well, how do we clear up this congestion? How do we do it? Or where do we get hope? Because it sounds hopeless. Well, we know the list. We all want healthy relationships. So we know what makes us congested. But it sounds like there's no hope. So where's the hope? And so Paul asked that same question. Where's his hope? I know how I'm supposed to love God. I know how I'm supposed to love my neighbor. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. And so he says, but there is hope. There's hope for those who are in Christ Jesus. So we bring it back to Jesus. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death. So in other words, sin and death still exist, but we don't have to be slaves to it. We don't have to be slaves to it because we're not alone. We're not alone. When we claim Jesus, when we claim a relationship with God through Christ, we get the benefits of the Holy Spirit. We're not alone. And so now, and what Paul is going to later say, is that this Spirit that lives within us is going to aid and abet us in a positive way. It's going to convict us. And so when I start to be rude to Gina, I'm getting ready to say something rude to her. If I am in Christ and the Spirit is in me, at minimum I should be hearing that voice in my head. In this case, voices in your head is a good thing. And it's the Spirit convicting me, saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And more importantly than that, the Spirit living in me, giving me something good and kind and loving to say to Gina, even if she doesn't deserve it. Just kidding. Because you don't want to be patronizing either. People know that, can recognize that. I'm talking about for genuine relationships. And again, that old rule, never miss an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. The Spirit will help us with that. And so maybe for today, what we do is we don't tackle all 7 of those congestion points. We don't tackle all of our relationships. You know, I can't solve my relationship with my wife and Lydia and Sharon and Cindy this week. Can't do it. I'm human. But I'm going to tackle the most important, or I'm going to put them in a list. And so I'm going to tackle along my wife first. Or the most critical. You know, Cindy and I are falling apart, and we work together. We have to figure it out. So that's code red. So you pick one of those on your list. We all have one. We all have one person where we got to fix this relationship in a hurry. Life is short. Then further, we don't tackle all 7. Maybe you can think of what's congesting, what's wrong with this relationship with Cindy and I. By the way, there's nothing wrong with Cindy and I. You know me by now, but if it's your first day, I use people in our sermons, and it's a complete lie usually what I'm saying about them. But anyway, unless it's nice. I usually making that up too. But so what's one of these 7? Is it time? Is time the real factor here? Or is it I'm constantly being rude, cutting her down? Or maybe I'm impatient? And so pick one of those. I'm impatient. I'm so impatient with Cindy. I'm not impatient with Paul, but I'm impatient with Cindy. What's going on there? And so you pick one person, one relationship, and one of those, or maybe 2 of those areas on that list, and you say, we're going to address it. I'm going to make a movement in that area. I'm clear on what the problem is. I'm clear that there's an issue with this relationship, and I'm clear on what is going on, and so I'm going to make a movement in that direction to fix it this week. And then in the back of your mind, always remember Paul. Paul's blame. So the blame is on me. It's in me. It's an inner conflict that's causing conflict with Cindy and I. It's my problem. So put it on yourself. Pray for yourself. Lord, help me be more patient with my friend Cindy. Help me be more patient in this way. So put it all on you. And then you'll start to have a healthier relationship with that person. And then you nurture it, and you continue. You maybe tackle something else on the list. You get it in a good place. You go to the next person. And then we'll start to have healthier relationships with family and friends and co-workers. And we never go it alone. We go in it with Christ in us. That's why it goes back to last week. To have Christ in you, you got to be listening to Jesus. You got to be spending time with your scripture. You got to be spending time in worship, spending time serving others, and spending time in prayer as well. And then the Spirit will be with you. And the Spirit will be helping you navigate these otherwise complicated relationships, and you'll be on your way one step closer to a simple life.